Your sister gets sick every time she sees your face. That's what my mother said to me before handing me a trash bag and telling me I had until midnight to clear out of the house. For years, I was the quiet, reliable daughter who paid half the mortgage, covered the utility bills, and kept the roof over our heads while my younger sister lived off excuses. But when my sister decided she wanted my room and my quiet stability for herself, my parents didn't hesitate. They tossed my things onto the porch and slammed the door in my face. They thought I'd come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. They didn't realize that when I walked away, I took the entire foundation of their lives with me. Exactly 7 days later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Maya, I'm 27 years old, and in that single moment, 27 years of trying to earn my family's love evaporated into thin air. I stood there in silence, staring at my mother, waiting for my father to step in or say something. But he just stood in the doorway, folding his arms and staring at the floor, silently agreeing with every cruel word. My 24-year-old sister, Chloe, was sitting on the couch downstairs, dabbing at non-existent tears, pretending to be the fragile victim once again. For years, I was the quiet, reliable daughter. I worked 50 hours a week, paid half the mortgage, covered the groceries, and kept the roof over our heads while Chloe lived off endless excuses and dramatic breakdowns. But truth didn't matter in our house. Chloe's comfort was law, and I was suddenly an inconvenient extra. I didn't scream. I didn't beg, bargain, or cry. I simply walked over to my closet, packed one single suitcase with my essential clothes and work documents, and left the trash bag on the floor. I walked downstairs, set my house key on the kitchen counter, and walked out into the dark night without looking back. To understand how my mother could toss me out like trash, you have to understand the dynamic that ruled our household for 5 long years. On paper, my parents were the adults, the heads of the family. But in reality, I was the invisible pillar holding up the entire structure. When my father lost his job 3 years ago, it was my savings that saved our home from tax foreclosure. When inflation sent grocery prices through the roof, it was my credit card that kept the pantry stocked. I quietly set up auto-pay accounts, paying the primary mortgage directly to the bank, covering the property insurance, and settling vendor debts under my own name. I did it out of duty, believing that a real family takes care of one another. Then there was Chloe. My younger sister possessed a master's degree in weaponized helplessness. Every time life demanded accountability from her, whether it was finding a job, paying her own phone bill, or keeping a promise, she would suddenly develop an untreatable, mysterious illness that required full emotional and financial support from our parents. And my parents swallowed every word. To them, Chloe was a delicate flower that needed constant nurturing, while I was an endless bank account that required no care at all. They convinced themselves that the house was thriving because of their wisdom, completely blind to the fact that I was absorbing every financial shock behind the scenes. When Chloe decided she wanted my larger bedroom to start a wellness podcast, I finally said no. That single no was treated like treason. Within 48 hours, my mother had convinced herself that my presence was causing Chloe's mysterious stress symptoms. They thought kicking me out was a lesson in authority. They had no idea they were pulling the plug on their own life support. The night I was kicked out, I didn't end up on a friend's couch or in a cheap motel. I drove straight to a modest, light-filled one-bedroom apartment downtown. What my parents didn't know was that I had secretly signed a lease on this place 3 months earlier. I had seen the writing on the wall, the endless demands, Chloe's growing hostility, and my parents' bottomless entitlement had warned me that a breaking point was coming. I had slowly moved extra clothes and essentials into the apartment over several weeks, preparing for my escape. Sitting on my new couch in the quiet apartment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. But I also knew I had a responsibility to untangle myself from their lives completely. I logged into my laptop and began the silent reset. First, I canceled the auto-pay features linked to my main checking account for the house's electric, water, and high-speed internet bills. Next, I updated my direct contributions to the mortgage account, adjusting the payment so It reflected only my strict legal minimum, leaving the main bulk of the monthly balance open. Finally, I removed my mother as an authorized user on my secondary credit card, the one she conveniently used for emergency groceries. I didn't leave angry messages, and I didn't make dramatic threats on social media. I simply revoked their unearned access to my labor and my life. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and slept peacefully for the first time in 5 years. Days 1 through 5 passed in absolute, deafening radio silence. I could picture the scene at my parents' house perfectly. Chloe was likely lounging in my former bedroom, celebrating her victory, spreading her podcasts and clutter across my space. My mother was probably boasting to her friends about how she had finally taken control of her household, believing I was sitting alone in some dingy room, crying into my pillow and desperate to beg for forgiveness. They thought my absence was a punishment for me. They didn't realize it was a ticking clock for them. On day 6, the dominoes began to fall. The first shock came when the electric company processed its monthly draft, only for the automated system to register a declined transaction because the account under my name had been officially disconnected. Hours later, the internet cut out mid-afternoon, right when Chloe was attempting to go live for her social media followers. By evening, my father sat down to pay the monthly stack of mail order statements, assuming my usual silent subsidies would cover the bulk of the balance. Instead, he was greeted by stark red overdue notices for the home insurance and a bank statement showing the true, unsubsidized mortgage payment due in full. For 5 years, they had lived under the delusion that they were prosperous, independent homeowners. In reality, they were living in a castle built on my paycheck. Without my funds quietly filling the gaps, their lifestyle collapsed in less than a week. On the morning of the 7th day, the silence broke. I was sitting at my kitchen table, enjoying a quiet cup of coffee, when my phone vibrated against the wood. My father's name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. A minute later, a second call came through. Then a third. By noon, my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. First came a barrage of frantic text messages from my father, his usual stern demeanor completely replaced by panic. "Maya, call me back immediately. The electric company says the account is closed. What is going on with the mortgage payment?" An hour later, my mother started calling. When I didn't pick up, her voice messages drifted between furious rage and hysterical guilt-tripping. "How could you do this to your family? Your sister is having a massive anxiety attack because the internet went out. You are destroying this home." Finally, the ultimate irony. A call from Chloe herself. Her text read, "Maya, you're being so selfish. Mom is crying, Dad is screaming, and my whole day is ruined because of your petty games. Call Dad right now and fix this." Not once did any of them ask where I was sleeping, how I was eating, or if I was okay after being thrown out in the middle of the night. They didn't miss me. They missed my bank account. I set my phone face down on the table and let every single call go straight to voicemail. They tracked me down at my new apartment building around 4 o'clock that afternoon. They must have followed the address on a forwarded mail notice. When I opened my door, my parents stood in the hallway looking haggard, desperate, and visibly shaken. My father's usual posture was gone, replaced by slouching shoulders, while my mother's eyes were swollen from crying. Chloe hovered a few feet behind them, scowling like a child who had been denied a toy. "Maya," my mother gasped, trying to push her way past me into the apartment. "Thank God we found you. What are you doing here? Do you have any idea what kind of chaos you've caused at home?" I stepped out onto the porch area and pulled the door closed behind me, keeping a firm barrier between them and my safe space. "I didn't cause any chaos," I said calmly. "You told me to leave by midnight. I left." "You canceled the utilities," my father barked, trying to regain his dominant tone, though his voice cracked with stress. "The mortgage auto-pay failed. The bank is threatening penalties, and we don't have the money to cover what's due." "That's because you were living on my money," I replied, looking him straight in the eye. "For 5 years, I paid half the mortgage, covered every utility, and paid off your credit debts. You kicked out your financial foundation, so Chloe could have my room. Did you really think my money stayed behind when I walked out?" My mother burst into tears, switching instantly to guilt. We're your family, Maya. How can you be so heartless over money? Your sister's health is declining from all this stress. Chloe isn't sick, Mom, I said flatly, looking past her to my sister, who flinched. She's lazy. And you enablers chose her demands over my life. I didn't ruin your home. I just stopped paying for your illusion. If you ever show up at my apartment again, I said, my voice quiet but firm, I will call the police and file a restraining order. My money, my time, and my life are no longer yours to manage. My father opened his mouth to argue, but the sheer coldness in my eyes stopped him dead in his tracks. For the first time, he realized he had lost all leverage over me. My mother wept silently, and Chloe looked down, unable to meet my gaze. They turned and walked slowly back down the hallway, crushed by the reality of the future they had brought upon themselves. In the months that followed, they were forced to put the family house on the market, unable to afford the payments on their own. They downsized to a tiny 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town, where Chloe was finally forced to get a retail job to help cover their basic living expenses. Meanwhile, my life blossomed. Without the constant financial strain and emotional manipulation, my savings grew, and I received a major promotion at work. My apartment became a true sanctuary of peace and self-respect. I learned that family isn't defined by blood or guilt, but by respect and mutual support. I didn't just leave a toxic house that night. I reclaimed my life. What would you have done if your family treated you like a bank account instead of a daughter? Let me know in the comments below.